Patrick's speech. There's Bonnie, Dad, me, Annie, Kathleen, Yaya, and Papu, and Patrick.
In order to address the issues which constitute the core of the American race problem, one must first answer the question, what is the American race problem? The answer is the failure of blacks to rise in society due to deep-rooted oppression. Since blacks were first brought to this country, they have been forced to remain in the bottom rungs of society. Whites have sought to keep them change the land by preventing them from receiving many basic necessities. Perhaps the most important of which is education. This past spring, I read a book entitled Unafraid of the Dark by African-American author Rosemary Bray. In the book, the author describes her own life journey from the slums of Chicago to her enrollment at Yale University, and then to her eventual success and happiness. From reading the book, it is obvious that education is the reason for her ascension out of poverty. From the very beginning, it is clear that the lack of education of her parents is what forced them to remain in the squalor of Southside Chicago. Her father remained bitter because he could not provide for his family due to his lack of education. He realized that if he could give his daughter the one thing that he was missing, then she would have hope of succeeding. Although lack of education is perhaps the most crucial issue which constitutes the core of the oppression which blacks have faced, there are many other important issues that have arose over the course of the past century. It is the many problems of the 20th century that have come to form the basis for the problems which continue to exist today. The core of the modern race problem stems from the fact that since blacks were brought to this country, they have been the helpless targets of American racism, a racism which for much of the 20th century was openly accepted in this country and has recently been moved underground. As evident throughout Bray's memoir, education is the key to the race problem in America. From the early stages of emancipation to the current day, various racist forces have sought to keep the black population from attaining the key to their freedom, which is education. The ridiculously low quality of black public schools, which existed in the separate but equal South, contributes to the plight of blacks throughout the South in the first half of the 20th century. Bray's parents are the perfect example. They were each forced to quit school at a young age in order to help the parents work the land. Education was not a priority during that time because the parents needed their kids to work the fields, which was more important for rising up in society. However, even if they had continued to attend school, the quality of education available for blacks was low anyways. The likelihood of attending college was extremely low as well, causing blacks to realize that manual labor was the only way that they were guaranteed to make a living. Bray's parents left the South with the main goal of creating more opportunities for their children. They realized that if they were able to bring their kids to the North, there was hope that they would be educated in the schools. Due in large part to the welfare which her family received, Bray was able to obtain a great education as a child. Her desire for knowledge and her ability to obtain a high-quality education resulted in her freedom from the world in which her parents were trapped. Another important issue which was raised is the issue of mistrust. Ever since blacks were brought to this country, they have been mistrusted by the white majority. The mistrust has led directly to their oppression, which has been inflicted upon their race. It is simply a natural process for someone to oppress something which one cannot understand and therefore cannot trust. Since the beginning of emancipation, white politicians have not been able to understand the plight of the black people and have hence continued to mistrust and oppress them. Although there were many important breakthroughs in the civil rights movement of the 1960s, mistrust has continued to exist between the white majority and the poor black minority. In Bray's situation, welfare was critical in allowing her to make it out of her horrible environment. If Bray's mother had not been able to stay with her at a young age and help her progress through school, then she would have never made it. She would have never learned to read at her high level, which would have resulted in her never being able to attend a high-quality high school. She was able to attend this high school because she did so good in her early years. In America today, much of the mistrust of the poor black minority has led lawmakers to cut welfare funding. However, many politicians who have been born into their fortunate positions have no understanding of the realities which many poor black families, like the Brays, must face. The privileged majority has let this mistrust take control of their decisions and has led them to view poor black mothers as lazy animals who simply want to live off government funding. However, what they have failed to realize is that, like all human beings, poor blacks simply want a chance to improve their situation. To do this, mothers must be able to help their children instead of being forced to work all the time. When the children of these poor black mothers are left alone in their bad neighborhoods, they tend to turn to such things as drugs, the next main issue which is resulting in the core of the American race problem. The prevalence of drugs in American culture over the past few decades constitutes another major issue which contributes to the current race problem. In Bray's memoir, the character known as Bobo represents the drug problem. His friends are often selling drugs to make a living. Although he thinks drugs are wrong, Bobo admits that people are going to take drugs anyway, whether he sells them or somebody else sells them. As welfare continues to be cut back due to the mistrust our politicians have for these poor black mothers, children will tend to turn to drugs as a way to make money. The drug business is a very lucrative and very tempting option for young black children who see it as a way to escape their situation without obtaining an education. However, the truth is that selling drugs rarely allows blacks to escape their situation. Oftentimes, when blacks are stuck in this situation, the only way out is through death or imprisonment. They end up stuck in the business and they have no way to escape. In a society where mothers need to have the ability to stay home and help their children, the drug problem has become even greater. It is a direct impediment to the education system, which is a much slower system in terms of rewarding students. There are many ways to address the issues of lack of education, prevalence of mistrust, and the influence of the drug problem. To truly change the current culture in this country of instant gratification, which tends to make the drug business look more appealing than education, things must be done to increase the appeal of attending school. Schools in poor communities must be given more funding and better after-school programs to keep children off of the streets. If poor blacks can become more successful in school from a younger age, like Bray, they will tend to stick with education rather than turning to the drug business to make money. This requires that elementary and middle schools obtain more funding from the government in poor communities. Another approach which must be implemented is to change the welfare system so it allows poor black mothers the ability to be at home to help their children and to shield them from their environment. The welfare system which Bray's family utilized was much more accommodating than the current welfare state, which forces young mothers to attend training sessions rather than stay at home to help their kids. The welfare system should be designed with the plight of the poor black children in mind because they are the people who will shape the future. If they can succeed in school and make it out of the system in which they were born, there is hope for the future. In Bray's memoir, it is clear that education is the key to solving the race problem in America. It is through education that Bray is able to escape her poor environment, and it is the lack of education which forced her parents into the horrible situation that they found themselves. The three main problems which account for the modern race problem are lack of education, the mistrust which politicians have towards poor black mothers, and the prevalence of drugs in the poor community. All of these problems can be solved through education and a reformation of the current welfare system. The programs are implemented in poor schools. If programs are implemented in poor schools, children will be less likely to turn to drugs and more likely to contribute to society. Once they obtain good educations, blacks can penetrate the ranks of political power and help to change the feelings of mistrust which exist towards the poor black population. They can help to reform the welfare system so that it allows poor black mothers to have more time to nurture their children, which will lower the likelihood that these children will turn to drugs. It is education which the blacks have been denied for so long in the United States, and which has accounted for their situation. If oppression can be overcome and education bolstered, there is hope the race problem in America will finally be solved.